So when it comes to diet, a lot of people try and go extreme on this and they follow keto or something else that's pretty extreme and then have a really difficult time with it. But I think that kind of the best way to approach it is just figuring out foods that you already like that can be made with healthy ingredients. Because the thing is, if you have food that's like reasonably healthy, and you eat that 80% of the time, that's a lot better, in my opinion, than going to something like keto, or maybe that's like 100% optimal diet, whatever. It's perfect, and then you quit after a week because you just can't maintain it. So, a big part of finding a healthy diet and being able to stick to it is making sure that you actually enjoy the foods that you're eating, and that it's reasonable cost wise, and other factors, for anything that's going to make you struggle to maintain doing that over a long period of time. So that's why we have the grocery list for you. Is all of those ingredients are very healthy, and so if you are making food that's just of that, it's usually going to turn out to be healthy food. But there are still a couple things you want to make sure of, particularly when it comes to losing fat. But as well, for the main goal of a lot of people in here is to kind of shape their body in a certain way. And so my recommendation for that is to definitely aim for a high protein diet, um, because protein is what's used by your muscles to kind of maintain um, muscle mass as you're exercising and then grow as you do a strength workout. you know, your body's going to recognize, hey, this is challenging. We need to build more muscle. And then you need protein as like the material for your muscle to be able to do that. So because of that reason, I recommend a very high amount of protein. This is the optimal amount, but you don't necessarily get more out of protein as a nutrient beyond a certain point, but it just gets converted like normal calories. But this point for most people is going to be 1 gram of protein per pound of body fat, which is about 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body fat if you're not from the US, up to, I would say, about 200 grams a day. Unless you're actually like a professional bodybuilder, you don't really need more than 200 grams. So that's kind of the point where there's going to be diminishing returns on that. The other reason why protein is very good and why you should make it a heavy part of your diet is that protein is the most filling macronutrient. And so generally speaking, when I do like macronutrient breakdowns with people who are like, coming to me and they're struggling with weight, generally speaking, their protein is a lot lower than it should be. And in general, their carb consumption will be a lot higher because carbs are like the least filling macronutrient. And then, sugar and other things that people demonize are usually also pretty high because those are not macronutrients and also don't fill you up very much per calorie that you consume. But I don't think that you need to be extreme and take this to like a keto diet type of, philosophy where it's like, I'm going to cut carbs completely, because even if you have it occasionally, there's reasons why your body wants that, but it's just easier to overeat if that's all you're having because it's generally speaking not as filling. And for that, I think that, a big part of this is going to be looking at, what foods you like from the grocery list, or, what foods you like that are made up of those ingredients. So, for example, people be like, oh, well, I like Asian food. And they might mean, I don't know, like a sweet and sour chicken as just an example. A horrible example. But I just came up with it right now, so please don't hunt me down and kill me for that. But if you make that by yourself, for example, you can make sure that you're using like a high quality ground beef that's like, maybe a 93% lean, versus maybe if you're going out somewhere it might be a lot less lean and there's more fat, which is less filling, and it's going to add more calories that you don't notice. And that's going to make your version of it more filling for you, which makes it easier to eat less and then also get more of the nutrients that you need. Then, you can modify the sauces you're using and see, okay, are there any oils that I'm adding that are really high in, calories compared to how much volume there is? Like, canola oil is a huge offender for this, and a lot of times people will eat healthy, but then they'll cook in like canola oil and not realize that because it's 140 calories per tablespoon, I believe, um, that getting onto their food can then add a surprising amount of calories in the long run. Even though they're cooking their own food, it has more calories than intended. The same thing can kind of go for other sauces. That's a large place where people will not realize how many calories that they're adding as liquids. But if you're making it yourself, you can kind of monitor that and know exactly how much sauce you're adding, and how many calories you're probably eating and what nutrients you're getting based on that. And then of course being able to make your own low calorie version, same as like using a low calorie syrup or something else that's similar. With that, I think when it comes to prepping food for yourself, a large part of the goal should as well be to make sure that every time you have a meal, kind of the focus of that meal is a protein source. It makes sense in a lot of circumstances to not have protein be your only nutrient unless you're trying to be really extreme with dieting, and going like full carnivore or something. But having a lot of protein in every meal will make it very easy to get closer to that protein daily goal, while also still being lower in your total number of calories. And then from there, you can just, select whichever you prefer. If, you like pork, you can grab pork. If you like eggs and egg whites, that's really great. You can put those into a lot of things and it goes really well. Maybe you're more of a pasta fan and so you do like shrimp spaghetti or something like that. And just finding specific options that have ingredients from that list that you enjoy. And from there, a lot of this is just developing that over time and finding different things that you like. As well, if you want to go really crazy about this, you can try to meal prep. This is where people will prepare meals for multiple days in advance instead of like making everything day of. And the goal of it is essentially to save time. Because if you think about it, every time you cook, you have to, take out all the utensils. You have a certain amount of like cleaning and prep work to do. And so if you make your meals for a week in a single day, it might take multiple hours on that day. But then you're not taking out, your utensils every single time to try and prepare that. You're just sliding something into a microwave to reheat. I think that not every food meal preps as well, though. I think pastas are really good. Soup is very good. A lot of chicken and beef dishes where it's just kind of a component can be very good. But personally, I find that things with sauces, if you stick those into a container, they generally don't stay as well. And personally, I also like things like a burger, and it just doesn't really work. But anything that you can, see yourself reheating in a microwave, I think work extremely well for meal prep. And as well, you can look into things that you could put into like a thermos, like soup, or, like macaroni and a meat, for example, or like pastas with meats. All very good. And then you can put those into a thermos if you're going to work, for example, and you want something hot. Sandwiches can be very good because you can make them very easily, then just put them in a refrigerator until the day that you want to use them, and then take them with you for lunch as well. Pretty much anything like that. But meal prepping is mostly just a way to cut down on time. If you want to go to the absolute extreme of it, you can look into meal prep services. These cost a fair amount of money, but it's basically someone delivering pre-prepared meal prep meals directly to your door. there a lot of times there will be, local ones where it's just some bodybuilder that's doing it kind of as a side gig where he's making some cash on the side with it, and he just offers it to people in the local area. So you can look up like meal prep near me and find some of those, and they'll generally be pretty cheap. But as far as like bigger corporation type companies that do it, that are available pretty much everywhere, HelloFresh is very well known, but they're technically not a meal prep company because they send you the ingredients to make the food yourself, which is fun. Um, but I think that bigger ones that are closer to like an actual meal prep company is going to be like a Factor 75, I think it is. And the one that I personally use currently is Flex Pro Meals. And both of these deliver an actual just package of food to your door in these little like plastic containers that you throw in the microwave, and 2 minutes later you have your food. It's ready. You know exactly how many calories it is. You know exactly how much fat, carbohydrates, and protein is in there. And you know that every single meal is going to be really healthy. But that's a very big extreme. Not many people are going to be able to go all that way or afford it. But I personally do think that if you find that you struggle with eating healthy because sometimes you just don't like cooking, meal prepping and, having one day where you do cook and then prepare for all the days where you're not going to feel like it, or getting a meal prep store so you can just throw something in the microwave sent to you, are very good options. But the big thing is going to be making sure, of course, that whatever you're cooking, you know how many calories are in it. And then from there, I think the second most important thing is trying to make sure that the macros are sort of balanced, where you want to be sure that you have a lot of protein, so it's very filling, and then a ratio as well of fat and carbs. These get demonized for a lot of different reasons, but eating fat doesn't inherently make you fat. Eating carbs doesn't inherently make you fat either. It's just kind of, they're a little less filling than protein, and there might be, certain reasons why you want more or less of something, depending on the type of meal, or, depending on how you're feeling that day and the nutrient needs of your body and what you're doing. Beyond that, I think a lot of people try and focus on things like organic food or other factors like that. I've had people worry about, how much starch is in potatoes, or like different types of apples, or sweet potatoes versus regular potatoes, or what's the best fruit or vegetable to have with something. And personally, I think that a lot of these are such small optimizations that it doesn't really matter that much. And until you're getting to the point where you're having, healthy meals at least 80% of the time, and it's, food that you are preparing for yourself, I don't think it really makes sense to focus on this. When traveling, what you can do to try and make things a bit more healthy is, of course, meal prepping things that are good on the go. So again, stuff in a thermos, or like sandwiches, I think are both very good options. Bringing bottles of water or something like that with you can also be very good to avoid trying to get soda at a gas station or something. And then healthy snacks like fruit, dried fruit or veggies, raisins, certain nuts, stuff like that can be very good while traveling. Along with things like those little yogurt patches or other things that you might find along the way. Then if you're, out of the house, you don't really have an option to cook for yourself, I think the best thing you can do to try and still stick to your diet, if that's something that you're concerned of, is just making sure that when you go and get food, that you try and have still protein be a very dominant part of every meal, and that you avoid things like, sides or drinks that end up adding a lot of calories but aren't necessarily very filling versions of food.